So yeah, at GW, well, we'll talk about it, and we'll talk about what's going on college campuses, and I'll play out for you that exact scenario and some other scenarios that have occurred to students who I've worked with. I'm also going to show you a couple of videos they're short, but they'll give you a real detailed understanding of what's going on. But even more importantly, to understand BDS, you have to understand anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism is not something that you can understand. I mean, it's a virus. I mean, it's like saying you understand cancer and how it comes from. I mean, it's not possible to really understand it or where it comes from. However, there's an idea in the Torah. And I want to show you this idea and show you the way a couple of different people reacted to this idea, some other historical figures, and see if we can't figure it out. But before we jump into that, let me just quickly explain BDS. So BDS stands for the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement. And the whole point of it is to say, if we can, we as Palestinians, and it's essentially Palestinian-driven, wherever those Palestinians are living, whether they're living in European capitals or whether they're living in the United States, those are mainly where these things are going on. So there's this movement who says, we as Palestinians cannot defeat Israel militarily. We can lob all the Qassam rockets and Katyushas we want. We can blow up as many schools, cafes, buses as we want, and we have. And you know what it's gotten us? Nothing. However, we can tap into something, which is the international community. Because what they realized is the international community doesn't really like Israel either. So, boycotts are nothing new. You may remember that if you went to Israel, like 25, 30, 35 years ago, you couldn't get Pepsi, right? You could get Coke. I mean, you shouldn't drink either because of all the sugar and the chemicals. But at least Coke was willing to go to Israel. And so there used to be, there was no McDonald's. No, everyone boycotted Israel because if you did business with Israel, the Arab countries wouldn't do business with you. And if you're making economic decisions, you'd rather do business with 14 or 15 countries than one. So Israelis still needed fast food. There's only so many times a week you can eat falafel. So they had fast food. What was it called? McDavid's. Anybody remember McDavid's? You could go to McDavid's. It was disgusting. I mean, it was awful. So Israelis, they weren't sure what to make of McDavid's, but it was an idea. And so people went to McDavid's, and it did pretty well until the boycott ended, and then McDonald's came in. And if you go to Israel today, you know how many McDavid's are left? None. There was one that tried to hold on at Dizengoff Market, the Dizengoff Mall in Tel Aviv, and it tried to hold on, and it was the last one, and it's gone. But now you can go to Israel, and you can go to Toys R Us, and you can go to McDonald's, because the Arab boycott ended for a variety of different reasons. So it's weird. Imperialism is weird. Because in Israel, they never used to give presents for Hanukkah. It's not a thing. It's not something that you do. Unless you live in a Christian country where all the Christian kids are getting presents and you want your kids to not feel left out, so you buy them presents. The Israelis didn't know about that until Toys R Us came. Toys R Us figured it's Hanukkah, we put up our sign, Hanukkah's sale, get your presents for your kids. And everyone said, what are you talking about? Well, if you're putting it on sale, why not? So now Israeli kids get presents around that time. Not because it's Hanukkah, but because that's when the sale is. So, there's also Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day is called Yom Ha'Atzmaut. So there was a cartoon that was going around recently that said it's Valentine's Day in Israel. So there's this video where there was one couple who was sitting and loving and saying, in Israel, you're either Orthodox or you're not. People, they don't really get Reform or Conservative. We're working on it, but it's not going so well. So you either observe Shabbat or you don't. There's nothing really in the middle. So this one couple's having this beautiful dinner. They call it Yom Ha'Atzmaut, Love Day, as opposed to saying Valentine's Day. So this one couple's having a lovely dinner. It's so wonderful. And right next to them, there's a couple that's fighting. And they're obnoxious, and they're fighting. And the one couple says, excuse me, it's Valentine's Day, it's Love Day, you should be kind, and it's not nice fighting today of all days. And the couple looks at them and the lady goes, we don't observe that. So it was clever. Thank you. Finally. So what you can do is you can say, you know what? Where is one place where people don't like Jews or don't have particular affinity for Israel? The UN. You know what? Maybe we'll take our case there. And slowly but surely, they realized that if they could start to boycott, divest, or sanction Israel, they could start to make waves. Now, the truth is, so one of the leaders of the international global BDS movement is a real tragedy, especially for music lovers. Because I always loved Pink Floyd, the band, until I found out that Roger Waters is one of the world's leading anti-Semites. Although he would argue that he's not, he's simply anti-Israel, although he cares very deeply about Israeli kids. So instead of me telling you what BDS is, I want to show you a little video of Roger Waters, who is part of the band Pink Floyd. You may not be a huge Pink Floyd fan, but hopefully you've heard of them. Actually, I don't care either way. But he's a pretty famous guy. Now, the guys asking him questions in French. This stuff plays well in Europe. They love this stuff. But he answers in English. And he gives about a 4-minute explanation of what BDS is to him. And then we'll take a look.
Vous militez au sein de BDS une campagne de boycott et de pression contre Israël. Pourquoi?
Because I've traveled extensively there since 2006 and 2007. And I've seen firsthand the predicament of the Palestinian people. And in 1947, when the State of Israel was created, it was created against a background that it was suggested by the United Nations in Resolution 191 that two states should be created. Well, there never have been. The Palestinians still don't have a state, and there have been no serious moves made to allow them to have a state. In fact, the last time that there was any movement really positively was in 2012, when their status was changed to non-member observer state from non-member observer entity. So the word state appeared in their name. But nevertheless, they need the support of anybody who cares about justice or love in the world to support their cause, to be allowed the basic human right of self-determination, which they do not have, and to be allowed basic property rights and basic democratic rights and the right to vote and all the rights they don't have, because in the occupied territories, if we're allowed to call them that, they don't have any rights at all. They live under martial law and none of them have any rights at all, which is unconscionable.
Okay.
And so BDS, so it is a perfectly legitimate, non-violent form of protest.
Okay, so that's the Palestinian narrative in a nutshell. Now, if you know anything about the Oslo Accords, at the time of the Oslo Accords and the handshake on the White House lawn, ever since then, Palestinian Authority controls the West Bank, and they control the Gaza Strip. And the Israelis don't go in there unless it's to kill a terrorist or to track a terrorist who they have a lead on, who they know has committed a terror attack or is about to. So a lot of countries are interested in preventing terror attacks before they come, and that's what they do. But in terms of who's governing the streets, who runs the police force, the Palestinians govern themselves in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Authority used to govern themselves in the Gaza Strip until Hamas, in a military coup, overthrew them. So what he's telling you is there's no democracy there. It's true. Ask a Palestinian who's homosexual, what's your life like? Well, he'll say if they find out, they'll throw me off a building and kill me. That's like. Whereas Tel Aviv is considered the #1 hotspot for gay rights in the entire world. So Michael Oren, who was the former Israel ambassador to the UN, and now he's a member of the Knesset, told a story. And he said, one time there were a group of American congressmen, and I was giving them a tour of the Knesset. And they came in, and they were listening to the debate on the floor of the parliamentarians, probably the members of Knesset. And so there was all in Hebrew, so the congressman said, what are they talking about? He said, they're talking about the rights of homosexual Druze members to get married inside the land of Israel. Because the Druze, who live like in different areas in the Golan, they're not so big on gay rights either. But, so there are people there, they want to come into Israel and see if they can get married in their courts, in civil courts. So here are the Israeli parliament in the middle of the Middle East, trying to figure out how to help gay Druze people. So, okay, it's not that big a deal, except when you consider that if you travel in 5 hours in any direction, the penalty for being gay is death. In any of the countries that surround, and including in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So that tells you a little bit about the democracy going on right now in the Palestinian Authority, where the Palestinians govern themselves. So what he's telling you is they have no rights. That's true, because the Palestinian Authority doesn't allow them to have any rights. So this is essentially, we're going to go to Dershowitz next. This is essentially the Palestinian narrative. I want to show you now the Israeli/Jewish narrative by the Dersh. Alan the Dershowitz, who is unabashedly biased and pro-Israel, but he's also pragmatic and not a radical by any stretch. And he gives a very pragmatic interpretation of how the Israeli narrative differs from the Palestinian narrative. And in order to understand what BDS is, we have to understand both narratives. So Roger Waters will tell you, as he just said, the Palestinians have never been given a chance. They've never been given an opportunity to make peace. They've never been given an opportunity to govern themselves. So people who are interested in what I would call real facts would probably dispute that. So listen to what the Dersh has to say, and then we'll take a look.
Is Israel's policy
Just let it run.
in building civilian communities in the area known as the West Bank the reason there is no permanent peace between Israel and the Palestinians? The answer to that question, despite all the sound and fury regarding the so-called settlement issue, is no. The Israeli settlements in the West Bank are not the major barrier to a peace agreement. A little historical context will make this clear. For 2 decades, before June of 1967, the West Bank, including much of Jerusalem, was controlled by Jordan. During that time, a time when Israel did not have a single settlement, there were numerous Palestinian terror attacks against the nation-state of the Jewish people. In other words, Palestinians committed terror attacks against Israel when there were no settlements. And they committed terror attacks against Israel when there were settlements. If Israel were to pull out of every single settlement in the West Bank tomorrow, it's unlikely that anything much would change. In fact, if history is any indicator, Israel could be worse off. In 2005, Israel abandoned every single community, every house, every farm, every structure it had built in the Gaza Strip. How did the Palestinians of Gaza react? They launched thousands of rockets and numerous other terror attacks against the nation-state of the Jewish people. The attacks continue to this very day. And every year, the range of these rockets get longer and their payloads more lethal. Only a very sophisticated Israeli anti-missile defense keeps the country secure. Can you blame Israel for not wanting to risk a two-front rocket war? But Israel has no right to be in the West Bank at all, many say. So permit me, a law professor at Harvard, to say that on the basis of international law, this position is incorrect. Military occupations are clearly permitted under international law following an aggressive attack by a neighboring state. Jordan, Israel's neighbor to the east, attacked Israel in 1967, despite Israel's repeated efforts to keep Jordan out of the Six-Day War. In defending itself against Jordan, Israel captured the West Bank and the eastern part of Jerusalem. Under international law, until a meaningful peace is achieved and all terrorism against it ceases, Israel has every right to retain military control over this area. Since no peace treaty has been reached and the terrorism continues with new attacks threatened almost daily, Israel is under no legal obligation to leave. Given the danger that Israel would be putting itself in if it did leave the West Bank, exposing its major cities and international airport to rocket attacks, it would be irresponsible to do so, which is why Israel is still there. Nevertheless, I fully acknowledge that a military occupation is significantly different, both as a matter of law and politics, from building civilian settlements, even in a territory that is legitimately subject to a military occupation. That's why I've long opposed the building of settlements in the West Bank. I believe it has caused resentment and has given enemies of Israel an excuse to attack the legitimacy of the occupation in January.
Okay, and that's ultimately the story. So what do the proponents of BDS say that they want? A two-state solution. What is their main problem? That the Israelis, in a post-1967 world, have conquered the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, which they've never given back, and the Golan Heights. And they want those lands back so that they can create a Palestinian state. And they say that Israel's occupation of those areas are the reason that they need to have this boycott, divestment, sanction campaign, and they can't make peace with Israel. So what Dershowitz just said is, well, what kind of peace did you want to make before 1967, when there were no settlements? You didn't seem that interested in peace then. You were still causing terror, and your charter, as the Palestinian people, was to wipe the Jewish people out and throw them into the sea. So now it seems, Dershowitz is pointing out, that calling the settlements the barrier to peace, calling the occupation of the West Bank as a barrier to peace, are a convenient excuse, but not reality. So what they say is, we need to boycott Israel and anything that comes specifically out of the West Bank. So if you went on the BDS website, and you should, I think it's bdsmovement.org, and you can see what are the kinds of things they boycott. So the famous one that they started to boycott was what's called SodaStream. So there was this invention in Israel that you could make your own club soda and then pour in the flavor that you want. So essentially you can make your own soda. We didn't have in this country enough choices of sodas. I mean, have you ever seen the wall at Publix? There are like 400 different kinds of sodas. But there's always room for make your own soda. So it was doing pretty well. They even had Scarlett Johansson doing their commercials, which stock went way up, at least from men. Started drinking all of a sudden, started being interested in soda. So, and she's Jewish. So, I mean, doesn't matter to me, but some people into that kind of. So they said, you know what? Their plants are in the West Bank. We need to boycott them. Okay, let's boycott them. No one buys SodaStream. So SodaStream moves out of the West Bank and into the Negev. What happens? All the people who worked for them were Palestinian. They were an example of teamwork, of cooperation. So now you make them move to the Negev and they hire Israelis. All the Palestinians lose their jobs. SodaStream's still making its money. All you've done is hurt your own people. That's what it seems. And in reality, it is. But the BDS people do not really care about the livelihood of Palestinians. They care about one thing and one thing only. The boycott, divestment, and sanction movement has absolutely nothing to do with hurting Israel's economy. If it was, it would have ended a long time ago because they've been doing it for years and they haven't made one iota of difference. Israel's economy is booming. Israel never had the recession that we had here. Do you know what the national bird of Israel is? What the joke in Israel is? The crane. Because they're always building. I mean, not as much as us in Miami. But they're doing okay. I mean, everywhere you go, they're building. So they have not hurt Israel's economy one iota. Has BDS hurt Israel? So we had a meeting at Federation in Fort Myers had to have been 6 or 7 years ago. And it was me and the conservative rabbi and the head of Federation of Fort Myers, which is not exactly New York City, but, you know, I mean, of the three of us, anyway, it doesn't matter. Sort of the quality of the sex in Fort Myers. So the conservative rabbi and I said, you know, this is a real problem. The Federation director said, BDS, they're losing. Israel's economy is booming. They're not having any effect at all. And the conservative rabbi and I looked at each other dumbfounded. Like, how can you say that? Don't you see what's happening? And he said, the economy in Israel is great. What could you possibly be worried about? So that's the question that we'd like to answer. What is BDS's real goal, and are they effective? That's the question we're going to answer. But before we do, I want to show you a little story from the Torah. All right? So if you look on the packet on page 1, this is a story of Isaac. You know Isaac, right? Right, from the Torah, not Bashevis Singer. All right, so chapter 26 of Genesis, there's this interesting story about Isaac. You may not be familiar with it. It's not that well known of a story, even though it's in the Torah. It is a bestseller, but not all parts. All right, chapter 26. There was a famine in the land. Yeah, everyone see it on the bottom left-hand side? Aside from the previous famine that had occurred in the days of Abraham, and Isaac went to Avimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. You know where Gerar is? Gerar is Gaza, ironically. That's where they were. The Lord had appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Stay in the land which I point out to you. Reside in the land, and I will be with you and bless you. I will assign all those lands to you and your heirs, fulfilling the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I make your heirs as numerous as the stars of heavens, and assign to your heirs all these lands, so that all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your heirs. Inasmuch as Abraham, on to the next page, page 2 on the right-hand side, you can see there's a 2 with a circle. That's the only page number you need to look at. You don't have to worry about the page numbers on the bottom. So what I did, I drew my own page numbers, and then I put in a 1, and then I increased it successively by 1 on each page, so you can find it. Obeyed me and kept my charge, my commandments, etc. So look at verse 6. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. So who else is in Gerar? Avimelech. There's this area called Gerar, which is Gaza. You know that's kind of close to getting down towards the Sinai Peninsula on your way to Egypt. So Avimelech is the king, Gerar is the land, and Isaac's hanging out there. Clear so far? Okay, so look what happens. Now we're going to go to Sax next. Okay. So Isaac stayed in Gerar. When the men of the place asked him about his wife, he said, she's my sister. For he was afraid to say my wife, thinking, the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she is beautiful.
General. It is also why I've always supported Israel's efforts to exchange me.
Okay. Verse 8. When some time had passed, Avimelech, king of the Philistines, looking out of the window, saw Isaac fondling his wife Rebekah, and he thought to himself, you know what, I don't think they're brother and sister. Avimelech sent for Isaac and said, so she is your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? And Isaac said to him, because I thought I might lose my life on account of her. Avimelech said, what have you done to us? One of the people might have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. Avimelech then charged all the people, saying, anyone who molests this man or his wife shall be put to death. So it's almost like he's got this recognition of morality, Avimelech, that if anyone would have slept with a woman who's already married, then bad things would happen to them. So that's what we seem to know about Avimelech. Also, he has a Hebrew name. He's not Jewish. But Avimelech, you don't have to be Amos Oz to know that sounds a little bit Hebrew-ish. So, verse 12. So Isaac's still living there. Isaac sowed in the land and reaped 100-fold the same year. So he's doing really well. The Lord blessed him, and the man grew richer and richer until he was very wealthy. And this is in a famine. So he was doing really great. They acquired flocks and herds, a large household, and the Philistines envied him. And look what happens when people envy Jews. When people get a little tired of Jews doing too well in their city. Sound familiar? Look what happens. Verse 15. So the Philistines stopped up all the wells, which his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham, filling them with earth. And Avimelech said to Isaac, go away from us, for you have become far too big for us. This sounds like the Jewish experience in Europe. The Jews that go to a place because they need money changers, they need lenders, they need bonds people, and the Jews come in because they're the only ones who are allowed to do it, and they do it. And they do very well. But then the people say, you know, we hate these guys. We brought them in here only to do a job that we don't want to do, and now they're running, they own everything. Or it seems like they own everything. And what happens? You get rid of them. You persecute them, and then you kick them out. You think this is the first, well, this may be, but when it happened in Spain other times, you think it was the first time Jews ever got kicked out of somewhere? You know, everyone said the Jews of Spain were so shocked when they got kicked out. Really? How could you not have seen that come? Well, all right, doesn't matter. But we get kicked out a lot, and this is where it started. Look at this story. So something weird's going to happen now, though. Verse 17. So Isaac departed from there and encamped in the Wadi of Gerar, where he settled. Isaac dug anew the wells, which had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, and which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham's death, and he gave them the same names that his father had given them. Now, if this were a sermon, which it's not, I would tell you that the wells were places where they went, the water represents Torah, and the wells were places where they went to talk about God. And so the other people, the Philistines, were sick and tired of hearing about the one true God, and they said, enough with you. We don't like your weird customs, we don't like your weird culture, we don't like your weird language or the way you eat, and we're tired of you, and we don't want to hear about it, so we're going to stop up your wells, meaning get rid of your Torah. Right, which is also familiar trope to the Jewish narrative. So, verse 19. But when Isaac's servants digging in the wadi found there a well of spring water, the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen, saying, the water is ours. He named that well Esek, because they contended with him. And when they dug another well, they disputed over that one also. So he named it Sitnah. He moved from there and dug yet another well, and they did not quarrel, so he called it Rehovot, saying, now at last the Lord has granted us ample space to increase in the land, meaning the Philistines have stopped bothering us. 23. From there he went up to Beersheba, which is kind of far from there. I mean, not today, but back then. Now look what happens here. That night the Lord appeared to him and said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bless you and increase your offspring for the sake of my servant Abraham. So he built an altar there and invoked the Lord by name. Isaac pitched his tent there, and his servants started digging a well. So at this point, just reading it, what does Avimelech think of Isaac? Another Amber Alert? Okay. That happened. Okay, yeah, there was one earlier today. Okay, so Avimelech wanted to get rid of this guy. Avimelech is sick of this guy. Avimelech kicked him out. Avimelech told his people to stop up his wells. All of his people were envious and annoyed with him. And now look at this crazy verse, verse 26. And Avimelech came to him from Gerar with Ahuzat his counselor and Phicol, chief of his troops. Isaac said to them, why have you come to me, seeing that you have been hostile to me and have driven me away from you? So Isaac's as surprised as anyone. Why are you guys here? It's like if the BDS people came in here tonight and said, you know what? We changed our mind. We're for Israel. The boycott's over. They're not coming. That's not happening. But that's how Isaac must have felt. What are these guys coming to me for? This is so weird. And so Avimelech gives the answer in verse 28. And they said, we now see plainly that the Lord has been with you. And we thought, let there be a sworn treaty between our two parties, between you and us. And so it seems that when Avimelech thought that Isaac was some sort of superstitious guy, who knows what his deal is, we don't like him. But once we see for real that God is with him, then all of a sudden we have a newfound respect for him. It's very strange, but it rings very clear to me to something I heard recently, and that was if you look on page 3, I want to read to you a part of a speech that was given by Pope Benedict XVI. The last pope, not the one now, the one who retired. It's hard being the pope. So this is Pope Benedict XVI, who was German. Yeah. So this was on his trip to Auschwitz in 2005. Okay? So look what he said there. The place we are standing is a place of memory. It is the place of the Shoah. The past is never simply the past. It always has something to say to us. It tells us the path to take and the path not to take. Like John Paul II, I have walked alongside the inscriptions in various languages erected in memory of those who died here. Inscriptions in Belarusian, Czech, German, French, Greek, Hebrew, Croatian, Italian, Yiddish, Hungarian, Dutch, Norwegian, Polish, Russian, Romanian, Slovak, Serbian, Ukrainian, Judeo, Spanish, and English. All these inscriptions speak of human grief. They all give us a glimpse of the cynicism of that regime which treated men and women as material objects and failed to see them as persons embodying the image of God. Some inscriptions are pointed reminders. There's one in Hebrew. The rulers of the Third Reich wanted to crush the entire Jewish people, to cancel it from the registers of the people of the earth. Thus the words of the psalm, "We are being killed, accounted as sheep for the slaughter," were fulfilled in a terrifying way. Deep down, so here now, I mean, the Nazis were much worse than, I'm not comparing Avimelech to the Nazis. The Nazis, Yimach Shemam, may their memory be erased, were worse than anybody. But look at the theology here. Look at the philosophy of thinking here. So he's explaining how he thought the Nazis thought. Deep down, those vicious criminals, right, the Nazis, by wiping out this people, the Jews, look what they wanted to do. They wanted to kill the God who called Abraham, who spoke on Sinai and laid down principles to serve as a guide for mankind, principles that are eternally valid. If this people, by its very existence, was a witness to God who spoke to humanity and took us to himself, then that God finally had to die, and power had to belong to man alone. So for the Nazis to wipe out the Jewish people meant this is the people who supposedly talked to God, basically invented God. They are the witnesses of God. But we are the master race. We're like the Tower of Babel. We're the people who want to show that humans control the world, not God. And in order for that to be possible, anyone who is attached to that idea of being a witness to God can no longer exist. Now, I'm not saying Hitler sat around and thought on those philosophical terms. I mean, he was a psychopathic madman who was just, his mind can't even be reasoned with. But the idea of the master race controlling the world is this idea. It's a similar idea. So look what he says. To those men who thought that by force they had made themselves masters of the world, by destroying Israel, by the Shoah, they ultimately wanted to tear up the taproot of the Christian faith and replace it with a faith of their own invention. Faith in the rule of man, the rule of the powerful. And so long as Avimelech saw Isaac as part of, just being in this world, then Avimelech was not going to tolerate him doing better than me. How dare you, Isaac, have more success in business than me? I'm the king of this area. I cannot tolerate that. I won't let my people tolerate that. I'll use propaganda all the livelong day to tell them how horrible you are. But for whatever reason, something in Avimelech that obviously the Nazis never figured out, and people who subscribe to that philosophy never could. And there are still such people. They call themselves different things. They have different flags, but they're still here. If they can never recognize that there's a God. But what Avimelech could was somehow come to this recognition that there is a God, and because of that, the Jewish people shouldn't be messed with. You actually see that, in a weird way, in the evangelical world. Whether they're right or wrong, who cares? But there was a tremendous change of view, really, in a post-9/11 world. And the evangelical world, I mean, you should read David Brogg's book on this. He works for Kufi. He wrote a beautiful book explaining how the evangelicals changed their view after 9/11. But, I mean, it was building up in the evangelical world, but after 9/11 it really changed. And all of a sudden, that was amazing. all of a sudden, they started to recognize that. Now, okay, so that's just a seed that I wanted to plant. Now, I want to show you another video now. You may be familiar with Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. He is the former chief rabbi of England. He's a lord, not of the rings, but of the, you know. So he's Rabbi Chief Lord Jonathan Sacks. So for some people, that's a bit of a turnoff. You know what I mean? How many titles? But he's brilliant. He's beyond brilliant. And he's one of the leading Jewish thinkers in the world right now. And he's also one of the leading advocates for Israel. So I'm not going to pretend like this is a non-biased view. But he gives a very clear explanation of how BDS ignores a lot of what we just talked about. And then once we understand what Jonathan Sacks says, then we'll be able to go back and answer our original question, which is, he basically answers it, but you'll see. And the question is this: if the boycott, divestment, sanction of Israel is meant to boycott, sanction, and divest from Israel, those are all economic terms. Okay? And if the economy of Israel is booming year after year, how could they possibly be succeeding? So we'll answer that question. Rabbi Sacks will help answer that. Let me just say one more thing beforehand. Well, actually, you know what? It's better after, because I want to get into the college campuses, but I'll do that after Rabbi Sacks. Hang on one sec. Yeah. Well,
I've got that.
What time do you have?
From Google. I read it as we were going through the class. So after we go through this, anybody going home, you would Google it.
What is it?
Jonathan Sacks says what you're presenting.
Oh, the video?
Yes, the video and
Oh, okay, sure.
the whole text.
I can also email you all the links that we're using today if you want. But this one's really good, and it's got some cartoons. So, okay. There you go. What time is it? 10:08 already? Hey.
The boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign against Israel is dangerously wrong, because beneath the surface, it's an attempt to delegitimize Israel as a prelude to its elimination. No Jew and no humanitarian can stand by and see that happen. Besides which, it will harm the very people it seeks to help, prolong the situation it seeks to end, and lead to wrongs in the name of rights. I support the right of Palestinians to a state of their own, and the right of Palestinian children to a future of dignity and hope. But the BDS campaign will achieve neither of these things. Let me explain why. Human rights are the rights we have because we are human. They are universal or they are nothing. So the test of any movement in support of human rights is it really universal? Or is it a matter of rights for some, but not for others? If the BDS movement were really about human rights, its supporters would be protesting the breakdown of human rights in countries across the Middle East, in Africa, and around the world. They would be demonstrating against the barbarism of ISIS. They would be campaigning against the abuse of human rights by Hamas in Gaza. Any nation can be held to account at the bar of human rights, but in a world awash with human rights abuses, to focus on one nation only, and that the only effective democracy in the Middle East, looks less like a campaign for human rights than a campaign against Israel's very right to be. It is, in fact, the latest chapter in a sustained attempt to do just that. In 1948, 1967, and 1973, Israel's enemies tried to destroy it militarily, by war, and they failed. Beginning in 1973 with the Arab boycott, they tried to destroy it economically, and they failed. In 1975, with the notorious Zionism is racism motion in the United Nations, they tried to destroy it politically, and they failed. From 1994 to 2002, by a campaign of suicide bombings, they tried to destroy it psychologically, and they failed. Now, through the BDS campaign, they're trying to delegitimize it morally. This too will fail, but it's serious. It's based on a vicious lie that Israel is a colonial presence in the Middle East. It's nothing of the kind. The Jewish connection with the land of Israel goes back roughly twice as long as the history of Christianity, 3 times as long as the history of Islam. Jews are the only nation in history ever to have established a nation-state in the land, and the only nation never to have lacked a presence there. And because Israel is the world's only Jewish state, and the only state whose very right to exist has been constantly challenged, the campaign against it is recognizably the latest mutation of the world's oldest hate, anti-Semitism. BDS will fail because when people seek to end a conflict by focusing on only one party to that conflict, they don't end it, they perpetuate it. There could have been a Palestinian state in 1947 with the United Nations vote for partition. In 1948, when the modern state of Israel was born. In 1967, after the Six-Day War. In 2000, at Camp David. 2001, at Taba. In 2007, under Ehud Olmert. And since. In each case, Israel said yes, offering land in exchange for peace. But the Palestinian leadership said no. And even when Israel unilaterally withdrew from territories such as South Lebanon in 2000 and the Gaza Strip in 2005, the space was immediately filled by terrorist organizations, Hezbollah and Hamas, dedicated to Israel's destruction. Simply put, the BDS campaign will delay, defer, and endanger the very chance of a Palestinian state, prolonging the suffering it seeks to end. This is because it misrepresents the conflict as a zero-sum game. Either Israel wins and the Palestinians lose, or the Palestinians win and Israel loses. But the conflict is not a zero-sum game. From war and violence, both sides lose. From peace and security, both sides win. If we really care about the rights of Palestinians, then we must care about those of Israelis likewise. Rights are universal, or they are nothing. And if they're merely a concealed form of hate, then they become not rights, but wrongs. Any movement for human rights or peace or justice must be fair to all sides, recognize the rights of all sides, seek the agreement of all sides, and win the trust of all sides. The BDS campaign, which seeks to intimidate and silence the other side, fails these tests, which is why all who care for our shared humanity must find another and better way.
Okay. So I know what you're thinking. How does the guy draw so fast? It was incredible. All right. Okay, so what's the... That's good, right? So what's the answer to the question, if the Israeli economy doesn't suffer any setback, how is BDS doing well? What's the answer? Yes. Okay. I mean, that's what I would say. But it's spreading anti-Semitism. More specifically, what else? Yes?
You know, we were at FIU, not too long ago. My daughter was schooling a community there. And they had a group of Palestinians and other Arab people. They had a big to-do going on there. All right? They are banding together. I found, and I'm talking from my own family too, that we are becoming very, we talk about the come here and have a meeting.
Right.
But where are all the college kids that should be here who are the head of the organizations, 3 major colleges in town? They should be made more aware of what this is, so they understand what they're up against.
Well, actually, when that thing happened at FIU, one of their students contacted me, and I contacted the Federation, and we worked on it together, and we did pretty well. Unfortunately, she graduated, and there hasn't been another leader to really take her place. But I was actually involved with that, and we helped. Someone put a Palestinian flag hanging up in the student center, and we got it taken down. But yeah, it wasn't pleasant.
No, and I was
Of course. Of course.
To be honest with you, I'm not saying the Jewish kids have to go in there and beat them up, but I'm saying the students,
Wouldn't hurt.
Jewish students have to
No, I know.
be
I agree.
aware. You know, we live, all this temple is a
100%.
The kids are very comfortable. They don't have to worry about what's going to happen to them.
Right.
But they should worry about what's going to happen to their faith and their people if they don't become aware and
Well,
become more possessive of what they are.
right, I agree with you, and we do work with our kids here. We have a lot of programs with our kids to prepare them. However, it's not right. I mean, when I went to college, well, look, the world's not fair. The world's not fair. When I went to college, I was able to concentrate on having fun, trying to get decent grades, and playing tennis. I literally, I mean, my daughter is going into 6th grade next year. And I literally caught myself thinking the other day about where she was going to go to college. I mean, chas v'shalom, we should get to that point, but that means, God forbid, I'm not ready for that. I'm not ready for 6th grade. But I actually started thinking, which schools will it be uncomfortable for her to be at because of what's going on the college campuses? And when I was going to college, there weren't any. There was no such thing. And now it's become a reality. So where are they winning? First of all, they're winning most clearly on college campuses because they are organized. They're often, almost always driven by Palestinians, Palestinian Americans, but because they have their own narrative, which doesn't necessarily represent the facts at all, they are able to find an audience with left-wing seeking college types. And, most students haven't grown into Republicans yet. So most of the people who are, in college are a little bit more left. And so there's fertile ground there. And what happens is, so I got a call once from a student of mine from Fort Myers. He called me up and he said, Rabbi, I just walked by the quad. There's an anti-Israel rally going on. There are Palestinian students dressed up as Israeli soldiers, and they're shooting other students dressed up as Palestinians and splitting fake blood all around them. When I walked by, they yelled at me that I'm a dirty Jew. What do I do? That's something that actually happened. And the most recent time that it happened was 2 weeks ago. I get those kind of calls a lot.
What school?
The first one was at College of Charleston, and the most recent one was at GW. But it's happening. Anti-Semitism is spreading. Don't be fooled. Ask the director of Hillel what anti-Semitism is like on the campus of University of Florida. Ask him about the swastikas that have been drawn on the doors of Jewish professors. These are things that are spreading and they're happening, and this is what it is. So when you talk about the spread of BDS, when what you said is accurate, this is successfully spreading anti-Israel sentiment, which in many ways is masked in anti-Semitism, which at the Democratic Convention, the most recent one, they were burning Israeli flags outside, including a state senator from Kendall, who was out there doing it. Thank God he lost the last election, but yeah, Abe.
What is your take on some of these Hillel rabbis or leaders, adult leaders, who do not make presentation at Hillel that is not so-called balanced?
You mean it's anti-Israel?
Well, if they have something that's very pro-Israel or very pro
Ah.
all the things that go with it, they have to have something that's Palestinian. So with it, they won't do something that's a totally like a discussion that we're having tonight.
See, the way I feel about college students, I sort of feel about Hillel directors. You may disagree with this. And I don't believe it all in, because I think we need to teach our kids how to be leaders. But I don't think it's the responsibility of kids going to college to bear this responsibility. I think that the local Jewish community should do that for them. I think our Jewish community should make 100% certain, with whatever we have to do, that these kinds of things aren't happening at UM, FIU, the schools around here, that we should protect our kids. Now, not every Jewish community is the Miami Jewish community. You know, you could go to the University of Arkansas, which is, you know, I guess a fine school, but there's no Jewish community to do that kind of work. And so maybe people like us need to help them. I don't know. But it's not fair to leave it on the kids. Now, the Hillel directors, Hillel director is a very political job. I understand that's very tough. Because basically when you're a Hillel director, it's an unfair job. Your whole job is raising money. If you don't raise money, they fire you. And if you want to keep your job, you have to raise money. And if the people you're raising money tell you they don't want to see this or that or something, you're out of a job. That's just the system. It's a ridiculous system. But unfortunately, the schools don't fund the Hillels. So they're relying on private donations. So I can understand them being in a bind. However, for any Jewish organization to put on anything that even smells of something that's anti-Israel is totally unacceptable, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, imagine one of the ways we could combat this, because some of these colleges apparently condone this kind of activity and this kind of
Yes.
is to boycott those colleges and not let our kids go there.
Right.
And I think that would, since maybe I'm a little chauvinistic, but I think we have the best students. They would soon begin to realize the error of their ways. But I have another suggestion.
Please.
That we can all, everyone individually can contribute. Not so much to fight against these people, but to support Israel. We bought an apartment in Ashkelon in 1973. Since that time, we have had a presence in Israel, a place to go to.
Outstanding.
Till this day, we've been there 29 times. We're planning a 30th trip soon.
Good for you.
Four of our grandchildren have served in the IDF already.
Good for you.
College in Israel. If we imbue in our kids a love for Israel by our own actions, that I think will go further to
Wow.
balance
Eshar koach.
than any derogatory or oppositional statements or actions that we can take.
Eshar koach. Halavai that every Jew would have your commitment to Israel. But that's about one. By the way, one quick thing you can do. Any college that votes to divest from Israel, you donate to that college Israeli bonds. You force them to invest in Israel against their will. Which is something that, by the way, that's something that we do. So yes.
A couple of things. The question you asked initially is, how are they being successful? How does BDS being successful? Well, we need to look in the future. They are developing future leaders. They are developing individuals who will go out and actually vote, actually run for office, actually be involved in the political process.
Yes.
And if we learned nothing from this last election, when you have 48% of the American public that doesn't vote, it's those that are motivated to do so, and that's the result that you get.
Yes.
And that's why BDS is being so successful. So how do we combat that? To combat that, I would imagine by teaching our children in day schools, teaching our children in Hebrew high school, and even in the communities, that they can't sit in the back row. They've got to be out front, they've got to be a proud Jew, they've got to be a proud Zionist, and they've got to continue to fight for Israel. When they see anti-Semitism, when they see this type of deplorable conduct, they've got to stand up and they've got to say, you're wrong, I'm not going to tolerate it.
100%. Michael?
Couple of thoughts.
Then Sharon, then Lenore.
One is there's an organization that is worthy of your support. It's called Jerusalem Online University.
Oh yeah, sure.
And started as an outgrowth of an Orthodox rabbi in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them.
Born and raised in Toronto, very talented filmmaker, and it's an organization worth supporting. It's an organization we have supported.
Yeah, they put out a lot of good stuff.
A lot of good stuff.
In fact, I saw one of their videos this morning. Because they have a Facebook feed where you can watch their stuff. Very nice.
Second left-wing academia to push the study of America's founding principles off campus. And they've been successful in quite a number of places. So, you know, you can study women's studies and you can study Arab studies, but in a lot of places you can't study the American narrative. Locke, Hume, Adam Smith. All of the things, the lessons that we have learned, the rules that we have adopted, that have enfranchised us in this society and allowed us to succeed.
Right.
Being driven off campus, by people who are hostile to our interests. I'll add one more. I vote for candidates of both parties. I'm an officer of NACPAC, which was at one time, I don't know if we are anymore, the largest funding PAC in the United States. I participate in making campaign contributions to people I'm not sure I'd share a taxi with, but who are very good on our issue. When our people become the sinecure of one political party, we do not have the wherewithal to push back. And as much as there is hand-wringing, and in many instances for good reason, about the nonsense that we see on the far right,
Yes.
most of this does not come from the far right. Most of this comes from what we would recognize as the left.
Yeah, and I think, let me just respond to that, because one point that you made that is so powerful is these college professors carry a lot of weight on the universities. And if you fight with your college professor, you can get a bad grade. And is it worth it? So the college professors peddle a lot of really left-wing agendas, and some of them have even been thrown off campuses. You remember what happened at the University of South Florida several years ago? I mean, there have been some there's a course at Berkeley that a few of you forwarded to me in preparation for tonight about, there's actually a class at Berkeley on how to erase Israel from the map. That's an actual course you could sign up for. So, I mean, what's going on in some of these campuses is so insane. And I will tell you this point as well, that I was a little disheartened to see that so many people were up in arms about the anti-Semitism on the right that came with this previous election, which there was, and you should be. I mean, you saw what happened to the JCCs, the cemeteries, it was a disgrace. But nobody said anything over the last 12 years about all the anti-Semitism on college campuses that have been coming on the left. This stuff on college campuses is not new. And most of it has come from the left. So my point is, both fringes are bad. Both fringes are bad. And they both need to be dealt with. Sharon.
All right, Jerry, you probably know where I'm going to go with this, since we had
Birth.
in your office.
Yes. Whatever you say, I agree.
Thank you. Remember that, everybody.
You and Howard would be in the same position.
Right. I think regardless of what age a person is, from childhood through teenagehood through young adulthood, we all learn from experience.
Yes.
And experience is our best teacher. And Howard and I have become very big advocates of a program called Birthright. And maybe you've heard of it, and maybe not, but it's a gift.
Birthright.
Birthright.
Best things going. One of the best things going.
And that is, in our opinion, the most effective and best way to get our young, impressionable college students from age of 18 to 26 to Israel firsthand. It's not political. It's about having a connection. Many of us grew up when Israel was just being formed, and was following the Holocaust, so there was a natural symbiosis with the state, and then we went through the different wars that occurred. Our young people don't have that experience. They need to be armed and informed with information, and you get it firsthand through experience.
Outstanding.
And so that's one of the things that we do have going for our young people, and we should at any point and every point encourage our our young people to participate.
Okay. So we'll take a few more comments, but let me just respond to that. Of course, I agree 100%. Hang on one sec. Okay. So wait 31 minutes and it'll be your turn. Because I just want to respond to that. One of the videos I'm not going to show because we're running out of time, but I had a video of a guy from South Africa who knew apartheid, and his family knew apartheid. And, you know, these universities have what's called Apartheid Week. Now, Apartheid Week has nothing to do with South Africa. It's about Israel, claiming that Israel is an apartheid state. So people like what Sharon's saying, you don't really know unless you go there. So I've never been to South Africa, but I get apartheid. Apartheid is a complete separation. So when I was living in Israel, my first year of rabbinic school, one of my friends got this weird infection in his knee. And he was in the hospital for like a month at Hadassah Hospital. And so we went to visit him a few times. And his roommate there was a Muslim. And when we would go to the public pool at the University of Tel Aviv, there were Arabs there. And so when you're in hospitals, when you're in public pools, when you're in restaurants, there are Jews and Muslims in the same rooms, in the same pool. Think about apartheid in South Africa. Blacks and whites in the same room? In a hospital? In the same pools? No. So to say that Israel is an apartheid state is to essentially say either you've never been there or you're a liar. Because it's utter nonsense. Yeah?
I only have a question. Talking about the Palestinians and their supporters for the people.
Yes.
Are they embedding themselves in the so-called safe space where the left-minded people find anything they don't want to hear?
I guess. Yeah, I think so.
Is that something anybody ought to be into?
Yeah. Interesting point. Interesting point. Okay, we'll take a couple more comments and then we'll wrap it up. 3 more, then we'll wrap it up. Start left to right.
I just wanted to point out, I don't know if most of the comments here know that Rabbi Beth started Birthright
Yeah.
with one wealthy donor at the University of Miami, and she was the founder.
Incredible. Yeah.
So we have an incredible history there.
Yeah. Very nice. Very nice. Well said. Yeah, Lenore.
I would just like to state an additional piece of information about the BDS movement, which began in 2005. One of the co-founders was Omar Barghouti,
Right.
co-founder of the BDS movement. And it's certainly his quotes and his statements, if you are familiar with it, when he's being interviewed, maybe not in the United States, but he has been interviewed and it has been reported. This is a direct quote. Definitely, most definitely, we oppose a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. And so the entire BDS movement, under the guise of human rights, is just not legitimate.
100%. 100%. Ed?
And Mr. Barghouti studied at Tel Aviv University.
Yeah. Some of the professors at Tel Aviv University are so far gone. Okay. Yes, over here. All right. In addition to the last 3 comments, we'll take 2 more. So, but please.
With regard to the problem on college campuses, many of us donate money to many colleges.
Yes.
If the college hierarchy were to understand that money flow slowing down and stopping, they would perhaps think differently. Yes.
100%.
Money talks.
100%. 100%.
The federation would have to make an effort to find out where the problem, which would have the problem.
So I went to a college called Connecticut College, which probably none of you have ever heard of unless you're from New England, but it's a good school. It was until 1969. So when I interviewed, they said, well, you know, we used to be all women until 1969. Now it's 60% women, 40% men. Are you going to be okay with that? And I said, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. Survived. survive. So anyway, my college, there was a professor who made a statement about Hamas. It was like crass, and he put it on Facebook about how Hamas was acting during the last war. And he was right. But some of the students, Palestinian students, went crazy. And they got him thrown off of campus. And he lost his job. From one Facebook post, they went crazy. And so I stopped donating. I don't give them any money. And they're going to have to survive without my $18 a year. I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to have to do it. So, yes.
I don't see any college-age people here, so I assume that...
It's finals week. Seriously, it is. It is. Right.
So I think that many of us are here armed with the fact that they
100%. Well, and on that note, I'll give the last 2 words, then we're going to have to wrap it up. Myron.
Well, Rabbi, you'd mentioned GW, George Washington
Yeah.
University. We were there this past weekend with our granddaughter who's finishing her second year.
Okay.
And last night, the Student Senate voted
Yeah.
either pro or against BDS. And the vote of the Senate was 15 against, 14 for. So it failed
Barely.
at George Washington University by 1.
Yeah.
But
By the way, I helped write the talking points to, not that I'm so great, but I'm so great. Because one of my former students was on that Senate, she asked me to help them. Her name is Sydney Eskin. You know Sydney, right? She's good friends with Maya. But we put it together, and they were successful, but her life has been hell because of it. It's been an absolute nightmare trying to get through that. Okay, Bob, were you going to say something?
I would suggest that everybody read the whole thing that Rabbi Sachs has written, that this was preparatory.
Yes. I'd read all 20 of his books if you can. They're all great. Very good.
I think the problem is even more insipid than we realize. I got a proxy statement from a company that I have to post in stock in, and I normally just throw them out, but I glanced down at it. And in addition to the directors, there was a shareholder proposal that said something about Palestine. So it got my interest. So I went in and I read the documents, and for an ownership of 2,000 shares, this is Merck, so this is a huge company.
Yeah, Philadelphia.
For ownership of 2,000 shares, this group called the Holy Land was able to get onto the proxy ballot and to propose that Merck treat Palestinians fairly in its dealings.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was shocked that it was there.
That is. Yeah, they're doing so.
And it was when I started to look, it was in many other proxies.
Right. Very nice. Very interesting. So if you look on page 4, I want to conclude with this. Here are my realities of BDS. Okay? Number 1, page 4, these last 3 points. At its heart, BDS does not aim to affect, I didn't come up with this, I stole it, but this is what I think. BDS does not aim to affect positive political change or improve the situation for Palestinians. Their objective is to delegitimize Israel and undermine its right to exist, and that's what they're trying to do. Like Jonathan Sachs said, if they only wanted the West Bank, then maybe their arguments would make sense. But to boycott Israel completely, which is what they're trying to do now, how do you figure? Because they don't recognize Israel. Number 2, BDS dishonesty equates former apartheid South Africa with present-day Israel in order to enlist people of conscience in a global campaign of economic and social pressure. And finally, BDS does not seek Israeli-Palestinian peace, as Rabbi Sachs said. Instead, many of its proponents, their real goal is the essential and same goal that the PLO has always adhered to, which is the ultimate destruction of the state of Israel. And they could care less today about Israel's economy. They're more interested in rallying the rest of the world. And to be honest, Europe is coming very close, as a whole, to turning on Israel. And so that's why when you see on TV Netanyahu in Thailand, in Singapore, in China, in Africa. It's not just to get votes at the UN. He's opening up new markets for when the markets of Europe crumble. And you know what? Once that happens, the BDS campaign will shift to the Far East and to Africa. And the same kind of thing will continue and continue. So we've got a real problem. I will tell you one solution that is working. And that is, at least in this country, and the one thing that we have going for us is we live in America. And we have the strongest country in the world. And what our government does matters. And so a lot of states have, including New York, a bunch of others, 13 or 15 states so far, have made it illegal to boycott Israel. And so, you know, Governor Cuomo in New York just said, if you boycott Israel, New York will boycott you. It's in Pennsylvania also. It's in Florida also. But we need to make sure that all 50 states have that policy. And it would be helpful if the United States would say to places like Holland and France and Sweden, you can boycott Israel, but then you won't do business with us. And you know what? That will change things. And Nikki Haley is already starting to change some things, but there's a long way to go. So if you really want to know ultimately what BS is in the long run, just take out the D, and you'll have your answer.
Where do they get their funding? How can we find out who funds them?
I mean, look, there's a lot of left-wing liberal causes out there that are supporting them.
Including Jews.
Some Jews, but they get a lot of money from foreign governments. I mean, Qatar is giving them a ton. Yeah, Jewish Voices for Peace, you know, some of these crazy organizations. By the way, you know, Jewish Voices for Peace. If you go on the BDS movement, they tell you to join Jewish Voices for Peace on the BDS website. So if you want to know where their money's coming from, go on their website. They list their supporters. But don't be fooled that they're not getting a lot of money from Qatar, from Saudi Arabia, from a lot of places like that as well. And yeah, and that money will not dry up. That money is endless. Yeah. Is what? J Street has a very interesting website, and I don't want to comment on J Street except to tell you this. I was looking at their website today, and it says, we oppose global BDS. And then right underneath it, it says, we support any effort of boycott, divestment, and sanction that furthers a two-state solution. What? I mean, that's literally what it says. I mean, it's like, wow, how could you admit that? Even if that's what you think, how could you admit that? Yes?
So you have children that will be entering college.
Yes.
And they're not going to make
I'm sorry, I can't.
They're not here to make it bigger on we are trying to.
Yeah, sure.
So what are you said the talking points? What can we arm them with when they go to college to when they get confronted with them?
Right. So there's a couple things. If you have all the facts, and you're one kid and you go into a mob of 20, you can't win. Because if you have 20 people yelling at you, even if you're Alan Dershowitz, it's too hard to concentrate and you get intimidated. So they need critical mass. They need to go with friends. And they need to all be educated. So when the Palestinians make a claim, you have to very simply point out, what you're saying is a lie and here's why. And that's why I don't think it's fair for college students to have PhDs in what's going on in Israel. But the reality has changed. It's also not fair that 18-year-old boys in Israel, instead of going to college and hanging out on the beach, have to go to the army and put their life on the line. But that's reality. If they don't do it, they're not going to have a state. So this is our new front line. And our college kids need to know the facts. The best way to know the facts is doing what they're doing. Go on March of the Living. See what's actually happening. But then they have to be able to organize as well. And if they say, well, the students, SJOP, or the students, whatever, of Palestine, whatever it's called, Student Union of Palestine, they have this much money to do this and we don't, well then we'll find the money, because that's unacceptable. They have the money to bring in this speaker and we wanted to bring in this guy but we can't afford it, well, we'll find a way. But they've got to know the facts, and they've got to have a bit of a critical mass. Just to go 1 on 20 is a losing proposition, even if you're Alan Dershowitz. Yeah.
You know, I hope I'm wrong, but I heard that there was a bill in Congress to defund the PLO. Okay?
Yeah. It was being talked about. Yeah.
Not one Democrat voted for it. Right? I hope I'm wrong with what I heard, but that's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, I don't know. It was being talked about. I don't know the details. I haven't seen the details.
To pay murderers to kill Israelis. Okay?
Right.
If they didn't have this money and the pressure was put on them, they wouldn't be doing half the things they're doing.
Right.
I was just curious, just to bring it all together.
Getting fired up here.
What are federations, what are local temples, not only in Florida? I mean, it seems like there has to be an action taken by all these groups. Is there anything going on like that?
The only thing I've seen that's, well, look, we try to educate our kids, we try to prepare them. And we... Beth Am, federations as well. I mean, look, a lot of temples are doing that. The best thing that's really happening that I can tell is that AIPAC is working with Congress to get these bills passed that states won't do business with anyone who boycotts Israel. And so, you know, that's how this country works. I mean, you have to speak to your elected officials and give them the truth. And God willing, they will listen. Look, here's what I always tell people. And I'll give you the last word and we'll call it a night. But here's what I always tell people. People say you cannot have, this is like the BDS #1 argument. You can't have a one-state solution, a Jewish country, if you want it to be democratic. It's got to be one people, one vote. Okay. Who's running the West Bank right now? Israel. No. The Palestinian Authority. In the Palestinian Authority's section of the two-state solution, by the way, you're really talking about, if you really want to be fair, you're talking about a three-state solution. Because you already have a two-state solution. You have Israel and you have Hamas and Gaza. They're two separate states. Now there's a blockade because Hamas has a tendency to send bombers across the border and blow stuff up. So they had to put a blockade on. If they would demilitarize and drop all their weapons, the blockade could come down. But they're not. Someone asked me, how could you make peace? I can make peace tomorrow. It's the easiest thing in the world. Just get Hamas and the Palestinian Authority to recognize Israel and to demilitarize forever and put an international peacekeeping force to enforce that they will be, led probably by the United States, that they will remain demilitarized. Who's going to agree to that? Yeah. What Arab in his right mind would ever agree to that? Nobody. So what you say to them is, all right, you want democracy in the West Bank? What would democracy look like in a Palestinian-governed state? How would freedom of homosexuals go? Would they all of a sudden have an LGBT revival and stop throwing them off of buildings head first? How would freedom of the press work? Why is your president, you know, Netanyahu's net worth is $11 million. Minus all of the, well, not including all the wine and cigars that he's stolen over the years. But his net worth is about $11 million. He's been prime minister for a long time. He's given a lot of speeches, made a lot of money. He's worth $11 million. A boss who's president of an authority that has no economy, that is virtually entirely bankrupt, is a multi-billionaire. Where did he make that money?
From UNRWA.
From our tax dollars.
From UNRWA. He gets the money that we
Right.
support for UNRWA gets funneled through
Right.
the Palestinian.
So he's in the 12th year of a 4-year term. How's that democracy working out? And then you ask, really? A two-state solution will bring democracy, but what you have now won't work? That makes no sense when you're talking about a radical Muslim dictatorship in Gaza and Abbas's dictatorship in the West Bank. So if you're talking about a democracy, what are you talking about? What kind of democracy are you looking at? I mean, these are the types of arguments based on complete fact that if you use them, you will start to win arguments. There's a reason these arguments win in the United States, but not in Europe. Right? There's a reason. Okay. Well, because the United States is a moral country based on truth. And I mean, there's some issues. If not, on this issue, and Europe is, in my opinion, is totally immoral in how they look at this issue. Yeah, last word.
I just wanted to add to
Except for Bulgaria.
what you said and the suggestion and advice to give the kids who are going to college.
Please.
Join the Hillels.
Of course.
I can tell you as
Of course.
chairman of the Hillel board and its students, I'm very proud of the students there, the leadership, and the director. They are head of the anti-BDS movement.
Yeah.
Tallahassee, and they have done a fantastic job doing this. That would be my, both giving money to these Hillels, which
Yes.
I said earlier,
Right.
it's all privately funded.
100%.
And come at, and
Right.
especially encourage the kids to join those Hillels.
100%. So, Baron, if you're complaining about BDS on campus, and you're not trying to bolster the Hillels on campus, then that's not good. That's not good. Again.
I think that everything that everybody's contributed is so important at the organizational level, at the political level, at the funding level. But let's not underestimate the importance of the one-on-one and how we need to empower and give concrete and conclusive information for our kids and our grandkids to have the right kind of arguments and ammunition to combat this
Yeah, sure.
when they confront it in campus.
Right.
First thing is to say, whenever anybody's saying nonsense about Israel, to say, hey, do you know I'm Jewish? And step in.
For sure.
And then come in with actual facts and information like you presented for us today.
Right. Thank you. Okay, we have to wrap it up. Okay, so very quickly.
Can I tell a joke?
Sure. Don't leave yet. Don't leave. I know you're in a huge rush to beat the traffic, but I want to tell you one more thing. Yeah.
It's a joke about Jewish togetherness.
Please.
So it seems that that the Yeshiva University decided it was going to begin an intercollegiate athletic program.
Yeah.
Right? And so it decided, thought about what sports it could compete in, and one of the places they decided, because New York City had a bunch of water, that they could rowing teams, right? 8 guys in a boat and a coxswain, calling out the cadence, right? And
It's a good joke.
And they're terrible. I mean, they're awful. They fall out of the boat, they finish last, et cetera, and so forth. And finally, after one terrible race, one Zion decides, says, I'm going off to Cambridge to see how the boys do it up there. And so he went to Harvard to see the rowing team, the crew operate there, and he came back. His teammates were very interested. Well, what'd you learn? He says, well, up at Harvard, they do it differently. There they got 8 guys rowing and only 1 guy yelling.
All right, before you go, because it's Israel's 69th birthday, I thought we would rise together and conclude with the Hatikva. So please join me. The flags are over there. Kol od baleva penima Nefesh Yehudi Homiya Ulfate Mizrach Kadima Ayin Letzion Sophia Od Lo Avda Tikva Tikva bat shnot alpayim Liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim Liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Thank you all. Have a good night.